everybody.
Morning.
My name is Kizzy Charles Guzman, the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. Thank you, everyone, again, for joining us. And a special thank you to our elected officials, our commissioners, and our team across so many agency partners who work tirelessly and care deeply as New Yorkers experience more frequent and disruptive climate events of all types. 1 year ago today, Hurricane Ida brought record-breaking torrential rain to our city. Thousands of New Yorkers suffered flood damage in their homes and businesses. And the most devastating impact was the tragic loss of 13 of our neighbors. Please join me in a moment of silence to remember those New Yorkers and express our deepest sympathies to their family members and friends. Thank you. Climate change presents public health, environmental, and equity challenges to our city. And while we remember and mourn the victims of extreme weather, we are here committed to transform, adapt, and prepare our city, investing to not only protect New Yorkers from climate hazards, but also to make our city cleaner, greener, and a more equitable place to live. Joining us today is the Honorable Mayor Eric Adams, who will kick us off as we present a new vision for stormwater resilience in New York City, one that centers our neighbors, invites world-class innovation, and charts a course for long-term investments. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kizzy. And to our teams, anniversaries are not only celebrations, but they're moments of reflections on how we could do things better. And I'm happy to be here with the team. And the team consists of our speaker, Speaker Adrian Adams, Borough President Donovan Richards, Council Member Areola, 32nd Council District, Bob Holden, Council Member of the 30th Council District, Assemblyman David Weprin, Assembly Member from the 24th Assembly District, Assemblywoman Rosick, 25th Assembly District, all coming together because we all realize that this issue crosses all party lines or neighborhoods, and we join with our amazing team of commissioners who are part of this initiative, from the parks to Department of Environmental Protection to, as we just mentioned, Kizzy Guzman, who is really doing an amazing job, and the Chief Climate Officer, in her role as Chief Climate Officer, and really looking at how we are forward thinking around these climate issues. So today, as we acknowledge Hurricane Ida, and it was the heaviest rainfall in our recorded history, flooding our streets and subways and basements in the city. It had a major impact on us. I'll never forget that day being out, looking through the streets and watching the Brooklyn Bridge flood. For the first time in my life, I experienced that. The bridge had to be closed down because of the flooding. Our neighbors were victims of climate change. 13 New Yorkers died in their basement apartments due to flooding. This traumatized our city. But climate change is bringing longer droughts, stronger storms, and heavier rainfalls to places all over the globe. We're witnessing right now what's happening in Pakistan as we see the heavy rainfalls. To what is happening in Europe with the dry roadbeds. This is real, and it's no place of denial. And what is happening right here in our city, particularly in the borough of Queens, and how it has impacted many of our coastal cities. We are not going to stand by. We are taking actions to protect our city and prevent future tragedies. And that includes ramping up flood protections across the city, whether it's from heavy rains or storm surge. This Ida was not from coastal areas. We thought we can build higher walls, but Mother Nature showed us it was more than just higher sea levels. This came from rain inwards. Crown Heights and other parts of our city that historically did not deal with flooding was impacted by this rainfall. Climate change is not something we can fight on our own. As I stated, it's a team effort. And this team working across every city agency, every level of government. We're focused on one thing, and that's GSD, get stuff done. And we have to get it done in an expeditious but thorough manner. Over the past 9 months of this administration, we have prioritized climate action at every level of government. Some of these solutions are massive infrastructure elements like the floodgates of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, and others will use green infrastructure and technology to help New York City become resilient to an Ida-level storm. That is what today's announcement is about. This plan would augment our existing sewer and stormwater systems with rain gardens and other flood managerial solutions, and help prepare our city for the next big storm. New York City has thousands of rain gardens like this one here. People think that we were just creating another space for a tree. No, it had a significant point. These rain gardens are more than just plantings. They are a strong defense against flash flooding. Each rain garden has a capacity of holding upward to 2,500 gallons of water during a storm. And right over here, you can see how they work. Today, we're announcing the addition of 2,300 new curbside rain gardens, bringing us up to a total of 11,000 citywide. These are strategically located in areas where we know historically we've had flooding, and it's an attempt to mitigate the overburden of our sewer systems. And we're beginning construction of 1,000 more rain gardens by the end of this year. Rain gardens are just part of the plan we are releasing today. We're also building out our own cloud-burst infrastructure and expanding other flood mitigation options, including blue belt drainage systems that naturally handle runoff. In addition to managing storms, we are using technology, which is crucial to anticipate monitoring the impacts. I'm a big believer in technology to run our cities smarter. We've installed flood sensors like this one in key areas across the city. These sensors are early detecting using technology not only to identify areas of flooding, but to use the data for future information and flow. That provides our cities with critical infrastructure in order to advise evacuations, travel bans, or road closures. It is so important to have this full frontal effect of prevention and intervention, and this sensor is a tool that we can use. On this chart, you can see the flood data recorded at this location a year ago. The storm dumped rainfalls on our city at a record-breaking 3.75 inches an hour, nearly doubling the city previous records. These sensors recorded it all for future storm management. Now we have this data. We're able to understand when we partner with the Office of Emergency Management and our other operations at DEP, we can use this data to predict the behavior of the storms. The city has already installed 29 sensors and will install up to 50 more this year, with a total of 500 more planned for the next 5 years. Again, strategically located to gather the information using historical data compared with how we will respond to upcoming storms. This is more than just infrastructure. This is how we're going to protect our city and our people from rising sea levels and stronger storms. This is how we can create good jobs, because it's about also using one solution to address a multitude of problems. These are good-paying jobs right here, investing billions that would have a direct impact and benefit for our communities. It is how we're going to lead. Everyone takes notice of what happens here in New York and how what happens here in New York cascades throughout the entire country. The city has been here for 400 years, and we're clear on this. We're going nowhere. We're going to continue to be prepared for whatever challenges that we have to face. We will pivot and shift and adjust. We're adapting in real time to the realities of climate change and doing everything we can to keep New Yorkers safe. And so I want to thank all of my agencies, especially Department of Environmental Protection and the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to Kizzy so she can allow the other speakers to come forward. And I want to thank them for their partnership, particularly with the initiatives that are coming out of the City Council and the coordination of all of our agencies and elected officials on the state and city level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Adams. You are so right. Fighting climate change is a citywide effort requiring all hands on deck, including every New Yorker. To share more of our plan, I would like to welcome another member of our climate team to the podium, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection and our Chief Climate Officer for the city, Rit Agrawal.
Thank you, Kizzy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody, Madam Speaker. And thank you for joining us here in South Ozone Park. My name is Rit Agrawal, and I am the Chief Climate Officer and the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection. As Kizzy and the Mayor mentioned, we stand here mindful of the fact that 13 New Yorkers lost their lives to climate change a year ago today. And we are here to commit ourselves to making New York City resilient to handle the storms like Ida that we know climate change is bringing. For more than a century, our sewer system handled most every storm pretty well. It's a massive system with 150,000 catch basins and 7,500 miles of sewers. They aren't perfect. They require ongoing maintenance. Some of our sewers, due to the decisions of borough presidents long ago, are substandard. In some parts of the city, like parts of southeast Queens nearby, there are no storm sewers. But in general, our storm sewers are designed to handle rain that falls at a rate of 1.75 inches per hour. Until last summer, that was the most intense rain that New York had ever seen. Then Hurricane Henri gave us 1.94 inches, and then a year ago today, Hurricane Ida gave us the 3.75 the mayor mentioned. Even though DEP crews had done their job, especially through cleaning catch basins before the storm, that level of unprecedented rain overwhelmed our system. Now we know that we need a very different stormwater management system from the one that we've inherited. We have work to do on our sewers, and we are doing it. This summer, we've implemented a new schedule for routine catch basin cleaning. We're exploring ways that technology might help us predict where sinkholes and collapses might occur. We're collaborating with the MTA to identify causes of flooding in specific subway stations. We're even more committed than ever to ensure that we finish providing sewers to Southeast Queens. But the reality is that we will never be able to accommodate an Ida-level event in sewers. Sewers that large would require us to tear down homes and businesses to make way for wider streets and wider sewers. But we are not helpless. Today we are here to share the vision for how we will make New York City resilient to the Ida-level storms of the future. Our path to resilience requires us to look to nature to augment our sewer system, to build green infrastructure that will complement our gray concrete infrastructure. Separately, neither would do the job, but the combination of well-maintained sewers and extensive green infrastructure can make New York City resilient in the face of the storms to come. We use green infrastructure to handle stormwater outside of the sewer system, to absorb it into the ground, or to store it until a storm passes. As the mayor just mentioned, we have already the largest green infrastructure program in the country with more than 11,000 rain gardens, green roofs, and green playgrounds built today. And as the mayor said, we're making progress now, and you're going to see a lot more of it in the coming months and years. Rain gardens are only one aspect of our green infrastructure approach. Since the 1990s, we've taken existing streams and wetlands on Staten Island and turned them into what we call blue belts, natural features designed to capture and naturally filter stormwater from the streets. The blue belts have been so successful that we now have 83 of them on Staten Island and a handful in Queens and the Bronx. And so we have now begun to think about how we develop a citywide network of blue belts. I'm pleased to announce that we have engaged Dr. Eric Sanderson of the Wildlife Conservation Society, the author of Mannahatta, who has written extensively on historic streams and wetlands across the city, as a consultant. As Eric Works tells us, water has memory, and many of the hardest hit locations in the city were the site of ancient streams that developers merely filled in. Eric is helping us take a look at historic waterways and wetlands and compare them with current flood maps and 311 data to develop a map of where we ought to have blue belts across the city. We're also looking at storing stormwater in public spaces. Cities such as Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and Copenhagen have pioneered designs for playgrounds, highway medians, and public plazas that are designed to become retention ponds in extreme storms. DEP has been partnering for several years with the city of Copenhagen on this topic, and thanks to their help, next year we will break ground on a pilot project here in Queens. We call these cloudburst designs, and the first one will be built at NYCHA's South Jamaica houses, not too far from here. There, we will redesign some of their open spaces, most notably a basketball court, to store stormwater during the most extreme storms. Finally, private property has a significant role to play. Earlier this year, DEP released a new stormwater rule that requires all newly developed or redeveloped large properties to manage stormwater on site with green infrastructure or storage facilities. So properties cannot simply shed their stormwater onto the sidewalks and streets where it can overwhelm our sewers. All told, we are confident that the combination of gray and green infrastructure can handle storms like Ida. It will not be easy or immediate. We have a lot of work to do, especially in finding more locations for rain gardens and bluebelts that we need, and this will take years to finish. We are now working with partner agencies such as Parks, NYCHA, DDC, DOT, and many others to turn this vision into a concrete strategy with timelines, budgets, and locations. I'd like to recognize my colleagues here today: Chief Housing Officer Katz, Parks Commissioner Donahue, DDC Commissioner Foley, NYSEM Commissioner Iskell, NYCHA Chief Sustainability Officer Kenneth, and of course Executive Director Charles Guzman for all of their good work, as well as HRO Director Giuliani, who's here somewhere. And of course, as the mayor said, our elected officials who are such great colleagues. Together, we intend to release a detailed plan in April as part of Mayor Adams' comprehensive sustainability plan that is due then. But our planning work does not mean we are not doing real work right now. As the mayor said, we'll continue making investments in our sewers and rain gardens and ongoing bluebelt projects this year. And just as we will make progress also on our other climate priorities, addressing extreme heat, coastal inundation and drought, and reducing our carbon emissions so we stop this terrible scourge of climate change that costs 13 New Yorkers their lives. Before I close, I'd like to take just a moment to recognize a few folks on the DEP team who have been instrumental as we build out this vision. Deputy Commissioners Angela Licata and Tassos Georgelis, Assistant Commissioner Pinar Balci, Melissa Enoch, Adriana Kocevic on our green infrastructure team, and especially our Chief of Staff, Kim Cipriano. Thank you all for the work you are doing to make New York resilient. And thank you all once again for joining us here today. Back to you, Kizzy.
Thank you, Rit. You know, this vision gives us all the charge that we need, and your leadership gives us the charge and energy that we need as we develop our climate goals for Plan YC. So next, please join me in welcoming Speaker Adrian Adams to the podium.
Thank you so much, Kizzy, and for all the work that you do. I'd like to acknowledge all of the workers who have brought us this far this morning. I'd also like to first welcome you all to District 28, which I fondly call the Great 28. Thank you, Mayor Eric Adams. Thank you, DEP Commissioner and Chief Climate Officer Agarwala and your team for announcing this slate of resiliency projects and investments that are necessary to combat climate change. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge all of my colleagues in government who have joined us today: Queensborough President Donovan Richards, Assemblymember David Weprin, Assemblymember Nili Rosick, and my colleagues from the City Council's Queens delegation, Council members Bob Holden and Joanne Ariola. Thank you so much for being here this morning. It is so important that we acknowledge the devastation that Ida brought to our city and to our borough in particular last year. I want to recognize the tragic loss of life as a result of Hurricane Ida. 1 full year has passed since that hurricane took the lives of 13 of our neighbors and upended the lives of thousands more. New Yorkers today are still feeling the impact of the extreme rainfall and flooding that's become all too common due to climate change. Queens was very, very badly damaged. In Hollis, Elmhurst, and so many other neighborhoods, families lost loved ones and saw their homes ruined. They experienced unthinkable tragedy and grief. We cannot forget the human cost of climate emergencies like Ida that are happening more frequently than ever before. They're disproportionately impacting communities of color, low-income communities, and others who have lacked the investments that we all know are vital. We must confront climate crisis head-on, and we also have to prioritize investments in green infrastructure throughout our city, but especially in historically underserved neighborhoods. Here in South Ozone Park and other parts of Southeast Queens, flooding has been an issue for decades. This is nothing strange to us. And as a result of environmental neglect, we have continued to witness tragedy after tragedy. As a three-term former chairperson of the second largest community board in this borough, I know firsthand that our residents and neighbors have dealt with it for a very long time, and it's about time that we right these historic wrongs. The previous administration's $2.5 billion overhaul of the sewer systems in Southeast Queens, largely championed by our very own borough president, Donovan Richards, was a monumental investment. As the projects in the pipeline continue to be built and completed, we are so hopeful that they will finally deliver the change our people deserve. But even more needs to be done, not just in Southeast Queens, but across the city, in areas most vulnerable to chronic flooding and storms. Today's announcement by our mayor of citywide stormwater infrastructure initiatives like Curbside rain gardens and cloudburst management, which I'm very proud to bring to South Jamaica houses, which we've been discussing for about 3 years now. The residents are excited about this. We need to make our neighborhoods more resilient. The level of innovation and strategic action must match the urgency of the moment because the climate crisis is already here and has dire impacts. These projects will help our communities mitigate flooding and stormwater so that when the next Ida strikes, because it will strike, we will be ready. This must be a top priority for all of us. Our residents and families can't afford another tragedy like this. As we reflect today on 1 year since Ida, it's critical that we continue to work together. We must make communities whole and prepare ourselves for the storms that are coming ahead. So once again, I'd like to thank our mayor, our borough president, all of our teams that impact our climate, our resiliency as a city. Words cannot express the work that you've already put into it and the work that is going forward for the people of the city of New York. We are grateful and we look forward to pushing ahead in partnership to help keep New York a great city on top of the world for the best people in the world. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Speaker Adams, and I look forward to your partnership in City Council as we continue to address the climate resiliency needs of New Yorkers. And so finally, the man who needs no introduction, please join me in welcoming Borough President Richards to the podium.
Thank you, Kizzy, and thank you, Mayor, to our Speaker, and to all of our agencies and to all of our elected officials here. Thank you for being here. You know, it's hard to believe it's been 1 year since Ida changed our city forever, but let's not forget, we're coming up on the 10th year anniversary of Hurricane Sandy as well. And I represented the Rockaways, and I know how hard it is to overcome that pain that we felt back then nearly 10 years ago, and certainly what we felt just a year ago. You know, the wound is still bleeding. The hole in the hearts of nearly 13 Queens families are still gaping. Hurricane Ida showed us the true power of Mother Nature and just how unprepared for her wrath we really are. And we paid for it as a borough. From Flushing to East Elmhurst to Hollis, entire blocks were flooded, including Fresh Meadows. Cars were ruined. Homes and everything in them were destroyed. 13 of our neighbors living in basement apartments, especially in Flushing, suffered the unimaginable fate of drowning in their own bedrooms. I'll never forget touring the borough in the days after the storm and seeing the hurt and devastation on so many faces. But what I'll also never forget are the scenes of neighbors helping each other, the clips of complete strangers stepping up for each other, the leadership of community groups who started raising money, giving out food, and distributing supplies right here. To me, that's more powerful than any storm. That is what defined September 1st for me. Not the way the floodwaters rose, but how we reacted once they receded. As the saying goes, look for the helpers, and the helpers were everywhere I looked. There is still so much work to be done when it comes to our recovery. And our speaker alluded to the fact that we worked extremely hard in the days after Sandy to lock in this Southeast Queens plan, this $2.5 billion plan that I want to thank this administration for not only continuing to build the foundation on, but also building upon it. Because you cannot resolve the climate crisis without addressing environmental racism. And as you look back to 40 years of this community, how development happened, how homes were being built, but yet there was no infrastructure being put in, it's hard to not say it and call it what it is. It was environmental racism. I remember being the chairman of the Environmental Protection Committee at that time coming in 2015 and asking the Department of Environmental Protection to show me where investment was, where are these sewers getting built out. And you could largely see on that map that there was inequity. I want to thank this administration, thank this commissioner and the prior administration for getting it right, for starting to build out this infrastructure in our neighborhood. All the investment that Mayor Adams is talking about today is a continued right step in the right direction. And I'm confident, because I've worked with DDC and DEP, that we're moving in the right direction. It's clear we need miles upon miles of new sewer and water mains across the entire borough. We need thousands of more rain gardens. Gray and green infrastructure are key investments in addressing many of the flooding issues we see across the borough. We need to make sure our catch basins are being cleaned constantly. It's a bill Jamani Williams and I sponsored in the city council. Because if a storm like Ida struck tomorrow, I'd fear we'll be right back here today in the same situation. So I'm going to keep pushing resiliency and sustainability for our borough. I know our mayor will, and I know our speaker is as well. But today we remember the lives we lost, we remember that trauma, and we remember all of those who stepped up in our time of need and lent a helping hand. Thank you. Let's continue to get stuff done. There's a lot of work ahead of us to make sure we make these families' lives whole and that we invest in the critical infrastructure we need to ensure that we're never back here again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Adams for last words.
We'll take a few on topics. If you have for me, I would like to.
Did we want to do the rain gardens first, or we want to do the?
You tell me. We're going to follow your lead.
You guys start. I'll start it at the beginning. Okay, cool. Let's do a few on-topic questions first.
And I think we're going to show how the rain gardens operate, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It takes a little while to get the water.
Okay. Okay.
So I'll take a couple questions first, and then we'll do the show and tell afterwards. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, good morning.
Morning.
Wanted to ask a fairly straightforward question here. What has changed in the last year to see that this does not happen again?
Well, first, I think as Queensborough President stated, and we're all stating that we're not. This is not a one-year change. This is a sustained change that we have to do. What has changed last year to this year is building out more sensors. Is building out more of these gardens. It is putting in systems with better communication to zero in on those who live in basement apartments. It is our continued advocacy that we do need Albany's help to legalize these apartments so that we can do our role. And so this is a continuation. We did not get here 1 year. The constant abuse of our environment created this problem, and now the constant nurturing of our infrastructure is going to ensure that we correct this problem. And when you look at the contributions, and we're going to do a complete list. I like your question. I'm going to make sure DEP give a complete list of all the things we have done and what we're going to do, so all New Yorkers can see the progress we're making.
Just to follow up real quick, what's the status of the census of basement apartments that your predecessor announced?
The sensors.
Basement apartments, looking at all the basement apartments across the city.
Yeah, no, our goal is to do communication, to do information, to make sure that we can look at those flooded areas and have the public become aware of what those areas are, and to continue to evolve on how do we legalize those basement apartments. That's the number one thing we can do. Legalization of basement apartments. That is what our focus is on right now.
And we got the water flowing, so we'll go to questions in a second, but just a question.
He's coming back. He's gonna come back. He's coming back. You live around here? Yeah. So I take it you hit pretty hard last year.
What does it feel like now they're thinking about all of it? People taking pictures on this side, you can move back. Everybody over here stand back so you see the other photographer.
Mayor Adams, I grew up in this neighborhood. I'm a New York City school teacher. And defunding our schools is just as effective as climate change.
Thank you.
You need to refund our schools, restore the $469
I'm going to bring back some
million
questions over
that were
here.
taken from us.
Kelly, did you have a question?
Faith leaders have prayed.
Follow-up question to the basement apartment.
Continue to pray. Pray with us all. We all need prayer.
Okay, I had a follow-up to the basement
Yes.
apartment questions. Brad Lander, the comptroller, mentioned that it's a state-level bill that has to get passed. Are you personally talking to state lawmakers about this and how it's important to get this law passed going forward?
How we get to say it again one more time?
Comptroller Brad Lander mentioned that it's a state bill that has to pass in order for basement apartments to be legalized. Are you personally talking to state lawmakers about getting this bill through and making sure that these basement apartments get regulated?
Yeah, and that's what we want to do. We want to, we need to help from all of our electeds on how to go about getting that legislation passed. That's the heart of what we need to do with basement apartments, is to get that bill passed, and we could use the help from the controller and whomever else wants to be part of that team.
Quick follow-up. It's a year later. What is your message to the residents that were hardest hit by Ida? Now that it's a year later, you're making all these changes, but what's your message to them after they've been through so much from that storm and continue to deal with the repercussions of the consequences of all that flooding?
Well, what we must do is to ensure, number one, information to our people, and that is why we're crucial that we're going to list what we're doing. Because people need to know that we're not just sitting on our hands and saying that it is going to just pass by. These are real storms. These are storms that are going to be here a long time. And our goal is to show how we're making those progress. Each time they see these rain gardens, they're going to understand that this is a new step in the right direction. Each time we continue to show these sensors, we're moving in the right direction. And it's about people know we're moving in the right direction. And that's what New Yorkers want to know.
Does anybody else have questions on topic? On topic?
Two-part question.
Yes.
One is there were a lot of homeowners after Ida calling for a buyout. And I looked at the plan with the HUD grant, and there's no money set aside for possibly buying homeowners out. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, we want to continue to look at those voluntarily housing mobility, those who want to buy out or to sell their houses in those high flood zone areas, and we're going to continue to factor that into the equation as well.
The other part of my question is for the borough president. We had spoken last year about the city creating
Yeah, I will continue to say it. I do think the city needs to create some permanent infrastructure around rebuilding homes. This is not going to be the last time we see a crisis of this magnitude. You look at how many 90-degree days we've seen. We're on record to either surpass or be just at the same line as Atlanta, which is something we've never seen in New York City. So I believe that it's going to cost the city more in the long run if we don't figure out a way to assist these homeowners. And not to say the federal government doesn't have a larger responsibility here. FEMA has created such red tape, and I'm not saying they haven't done better this time. I lived through Sandy, so I want to say that they were much better in getting into communities this time. But the bureaucracy and the amount of dollars that they're setting aside for residents is not going to technically help them rebuild across this borough. So we're really going to need a federal, state, city plan that I think creates some permanent infrastructure to assist homeowners to rebuild. Otherwise, we'll be here again.
That's all of the on-topic questions, right?
Yeah, we'll do one or two off topics. Probably some persons. Thank you. We're going to excuse y'all from the onward. You know, my police discipline kicks in all the time. You know, all right, brother. Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you, brother. Do one or two off topics before I bounce.
Go ahead.
Mayor, your Social Services Commissioner, Gary Jenkins, has come under a lot of scrutiny recently. Right now he's on vacation for questions about a promotion his wife was given. What are your thoughts about the job he's doing right now? Any considerations about his future?
You know, I'm just blown away when people talk about live-work balance. And here is a man that has been inundated, housing thousands of people that came to our city. I see Gary out with me 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. I see him up 5 a.m. in the morning meeting buses. And he did the cardinal sin. He went on vacation with his family. I mean, that is just so unbelievable that in a time that all of us are dealing with the impact of the stress of our daily lives, I commend him for renewing himself and coming back and doing those 12, 13-hour days that he's doing. I have the utmost confidence in Gary, and Gary's going nowhere. When I chose him because he lived in a homeless shelter as a child. I chose him because his dedication and commitment. And I think this city is, we're at a better place because we have a compassionate leader like him. And all of those, one thing my team knows about me, if you do something wrong, we have to correct it. But I'm not the leader that abandons you because people are yelling at you. That's just not who I am. These are great, committed public servants, and I'm there for them, and I appreciate him.
Two crime questions. The 25-year-old woman shot in the head. If you could comment on that. And also there was an NYPD video or a video showing an officer punching a woman in the head. Do you have a comment?
First, what I learned, and I was briefed this morning, it appears as though the young lady was an intended target. We're unclear yet, but we're going to continue the investigation. It's still new. We don't have much more than that at this time. But again, it really highlights what the governor and I talked about yesterday and what we continue to talk about, the overproliferation of guns on our streets and people using them for violent means. And then it segues into what happened in the 3-2 precinct with the incident yesterday. We need to be clear on what happened there. We had a person that was wanted for attempted murder. Attempted murder. Police officers found him. He was armed with a ghost gun in his belt. Those officers showed great restraint. They didn't discharge their weapons. They subdued him. While they were subduing him, a crowd came and attempted to disrupt the arrest. The young lady came, smacked the police officer. The police officer responded. I think those officers on the scene showed great restraint. They did what the system called for. They didn't turn off their body cameras. That's why we have footage of what happened. I am not going to tell police officers to go out, apprehend dangerous people, and then come later when they did what they were supposed to do and not say, you protected the people of this city. Now, we're going to do an investigation. We're going to look at the video. If there's needs to retrain, if there's need to do other things, we're going to do that. But let's be clear. They were arresting a person who was being pursued for attempted murder. He was armed with a ghost gun in his belt, and people got in and interrupted while police were taking action. That just can't happen. I tell New Yorkers all the time, don't endanger yourself, and don't endanger other officers, and don't endanger the public. At a safe distance, you can video what the officers are doing, but you should never go inside a scene of apprehension. And if you look at the video, the young lady was inches away from the person who was armed with that gun. That action endangered those police officers. And you can't do that as a civilian. And I take my hat off to those who apprehended the suspect, who showed great restraint to do so without discharging their weapons, who followed the rules and kept their video cameras on. That's why we know what happened there.
We have time for one more. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, there's a number of teachers that have been accessed over the New York public school system. Because of the access, we have now created where teachers are complaining about larger class sizes. How do we deal with the issue of larger class sizes, even though we're accessing teachers who are losing their jobs and not being able to handle those extra classrooms and the kids at the same time?
Our class sizes are down to 21 or 22.5. That's lower than the UFT contract negotiation. We're going to open our school system. Our children are going to receive a quality education. We're going to shift the resources where they're needed. I'm a child of public school. I'm a child of public school. I'm a child that received, a quality education, and because of that, I'm the mayor. And so, one thing you know about me is that I'm focused, I'm disciplined, and I'm committed to our children. And we're going to do a good job. I'm excited about the upcoming school year with our chancellor. Thank you.